and today I am drinking homemade iced tea.
Homemade iced tea. Oh, that's even cooler.
Yeah, yeah.
What kind of tea you put in that?
Um, I think this was licorice tea. I think it was Egyptian licorice tea.
Oh, I've never had licorice tea.
Yeah, yeah, you got to try it.
I will add that to my list. So, Joseph, I wanted to start by talking about your role at Heavy Metal.
Sure.
So, Heavy Metal is a company that I think is relatively unique at least in U.S. comics, because I know I first heard about Heavy Metal from the movie Heavy Metal
Right,
when I was
right.
a kid going in video stores and seeing that there. But it's been a company that's been trying to sort of remake itself and come back into the American marketplace a little bit more. So, what do you see? Where do you see as Heavy Metal's like slot in the U.S. comics market?
So, what's interesting is, so number one, Heavy Metal is a magazine. And because of that, it's able to showcase artwork at a larger size,
Hmm.
which I think is really cool because people appreciate art now more than ever. I mean, when you're talking about the language of comic books, before you get to the words, you get to the art. So part of the beauty of Heavy Metal is being a magazine. It's been a magazine since its inception in 1977 as a reprint of the French magazine Metal Hurlant. And so that's great. Heavy Metal really has always been, in one form or another, the leader in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. So, in terms of where we're looking to take the magazine and the brand now, it's that, right? It's leading in those genres, which means bringing masters to the equation. It means bringing new and interesting voices to the equation, and it means stretching boundaries. So there are things we're going to do that you wouldn't regularly do at other companies. For example, we're launching the Tarna series in December. You spoke about the 1981 animated film. That's where Tarna's, really known from. That was the first touch point and a cultural touch point for a lot of people. So with Tarna, it's a rated R comic book,
Okay.
right? There will be, you know, sex, there will be full frontal nudity, um, and we're gonna get really bloody. There's gonna be some bad violence in there. That's part of the nature of Turner's world in the multiverse, and we can do that. You couldn't do that at Marvel. You couldn't do that at DC except for Black Label. So Heavy Metal can push boundaries, and that's one of the things that I'm finding really exciting being there as an executive editor. I feel like there are no kid gloves, and I feel like there's no territory where we fear to tread.
That's really cool. I'm very excited to see when it all gets up and I feel like Heavy Metal, at least from my perspective, it seems like I see stuff and then I don't see stuff for a little while. Then I see stuff and I don't see stuff for a little while. So I'm really excited for you guys to get a consistent presence out there. Because every time I pick up an issue of Heavy Metal, I love it. And so I'm hoping
No,
we'll have that experience.
no, and we totally understand that. So one of the things that we're doing is starting with issue 301, baby, right here, Heavy Metal's going monthly, right? Because for the past few decades, it's been like, how many issues am I getting a year? Am I getting 5? Am I getting 7? Am I getting 9? Um, I think people need more consistency. They they want to support you, but they need some kind of regularity. So we're going to be coming out every month.
That's great to hear. Now, I want to talk about MPLS Sound for a second.
Sure.
And my daughter is calling me to her virtual school to help her. So
Well,
I'm going to turn my video off for a second, but tell our viewers here what MPLS Sound is all about.
okay, sure. So MPLS Sound means Minneapolis Sound. It's a musical movement starting from, or really magnified in the 80s with Prince. And so MPLS Sound is a historical fictional graphic novel co-written by myself and Hannibal Taboo, illustrated by Meredith Laxton, colored by Tan Chu, and it's about a band called Star Child that in the early 80s competed with other bands with the goal of becoming Prince's band. So it's the story about how Star Child would have been Prince's band before and instead of the revolution.
Okay.
And so it takes place from about 1980 to 1982. And the lead member and singer of Star Child is a Black woman named Teresa Booker. Teresa grew up on Jimi Hendrix. She grew up on Parliament. Um, and we show how Prince, who makes some cameo appearances in the graphic novel, is the person that really ignites her spirit to decide to create a band on this grand quest to play with Prince.
That's
And
cool.
yeah, yeah, and it's really, first of all, the original editor, Fabrice Sapolsky, I don't know if there's anybody who's not related to Prince or whom hasn't played with Prince that knows more about Prince than Fabrice Sapolsky. And so he was basically my Obi-Wan Kenobi in bringing me into the world of Prince and helping me to understand how Prince is this nexus that connects all these things, not only in music, but politics,
Hmm.
right? And so, MPLS sound, from at least my perspective, is kind of like a love letter to all creative people who the world is constantly telling you you can't do something, but you have to get up every morning and fight against what the world is signaling to you,
I
right?
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm very mad my Purple Rain shirt is in the laundry. I was hoping to wear my Purple Rain shirt today, but
Dude, come on.
I know.
I forgive you. It's fine.
But no, but I think Prince is such an interesting character to have on the periphery, because if Prince wasn't famous and someone told you about Prince, he would sound like a fictional character. He wouldn't
Yeah,
seem like a real guy. So
it's true.
to have him as this like peripheral figure who floats in and out of a story, that's perfect for him.
It's really interesting. I can tell you it was surreal trying to put words into his mouth, and the words are very few, but when he says them, they mean something. And I think that really speaks to how a lot of us relate to Prince, right? A lot of us obviously didn't know the man, but he made these impressions on us,
Have you
right?
ever heard the story that Fred Armisen tells about meeting Prince?
No, no.
So Prince played SNL, and he wouldn't go to the regular after party. Prince held his own after
Of
party.
course he did.
And
Of
so
course he did.
Fred Armisen is a huge Prince fan and wanted to go. So he goes to Prince's after party. And the only food they have there is they have a buffet of macaroni and cheese. And
Awesome.
so he walks up to
Awesome.
Prince's table. Prince is eating by himself. And Fred just says, Prince, I just want to tell you, I think you're the best. I've been a fan forever. And Prince says, you know what I think is the best? Macaroni and cheese. That's all he said.
Come on.
It's the best. You got to love
Come
that.
on. There you go. There you go. I loved it. I
That's
loved
all I
it.
can ask for in a Prince story. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So when I reached out to you to talk, I said, pick any topic you want to talk about. And you intrigued me by saying the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the DC Extended Universe. Now, I know you have history at DC. I
Yes.
know that I believe you worked on Static Shock, the show, a little bit, didn't you? Or no?
Well, no, I didn't get to work on the show because that happened, I think, in the early aughts.
Okay.
But I worked at the
I didn't work
original Milestone.
Right, a
Yes.
milestone with Static Shock. I wasn't sure if you had any dealings with the TV side, but I think that what to me, and maybe this is just me, what's so fascinating about the MCU versus the DCEU sort of conversation, which is it's silly, it's even a rivalry or whatever, but Marvel's detractors will say that the MCU is just cookie cutter filmmaking,
Right.
and their fans will say no, it's consistent filmmaking. DCEU detractors will say it's all a mess, and their fans are like, no, it's auteur cinema. I think there's bullshit on both sides. I really do.
Those are interesting perspectives.
But that's kind of like the internet jargon going on about these films. So I guess I want to start by asking you: is there one film from either company that you really love and relate to and think this is the pinnacle of superhero cinema?
Wow. Okay. So if it's from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I'm still gonna roll with the first Iron Man film.
Okay.
I really feel like, because here's the thing about the first Iron Man film, they didn't know that they were going to pull this off,
Right.
right? It was all a risk. And so I think what that does is that allows you to just like get to the core of the story and get to the core of the character,
Yep.
right? And the Iron Man story is just such a clear story about personal atonement, right?
Hmm.
And the heroic arc, and how, you know, the smartest guy in the room isn't necessarily the best human in the room.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so I feel like that one, I really feel like that's still the best one in terms of heart. The best one in terms of execution, all around execution, is Captain America the Winter Soldier.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the hill I would die on. I really feel like that's a perfect film,
It's
right?
it's it's shocking how much they squeeze into that film, but it never feels overstuffed. Like when if you ran down the plot of that film, there's 4 or 5 major elements to it, but as you're watching it, it doesn't feel like the way that Star Wars, let's say The Rise of Skywalker, it feels like every minute they're stuffing something else in there and it feels like it's an overstuffed film. Winter Soldier never feels that way, ever.
Absolutely. And for me, it's funny when I do this thing sometimes where I just want to get inspired. So I go on YouTube and I look at cool scenes from like different films. When
Hmm.
it comes to Captain America the Winter Soldier, I look at the Steve and Natasha scenes.
Hmm.
So, Cap fighting Winter Soldier, yeah, that's dope. I really want to see the conversations like when Steve and Natasha are talking with one another, that's heart.
Yeah.
You know, that conversation they have when they're driving, I think, to some kind of Hydra base or something, where, you know, Natasha basically says something like, "Who do you want me to be?" And Steve says, "How about a friend?" And Natasha says, "Well, you may be in the wrong business, Rogers." Like their exchanges say so much about them as individuals,
Hmm.
but it says something about the building of a friendship,
Absolutely.
right? So it would be those two for me. Um, Avengers Endgame is a whole different kind of an animal, which I have to give respect to.
Yeah.
In terms of the DC extended universe, which technically does not count the Christopher Nolan Batman
Right.
films, in terms of you use the word pinnacle, um, I think Wonder Woman got the closest. And I say that because I feel like Wonder Woman was the closest on track to the spirit of the character, the spirit of Diana, right? I like Man of Steel. Um, there's a place where I think Man of Steel makes a turn, but I think it was a really valiant effort, and that story has heart, right? But I think Wonder Woman came closer, even if I would say Zack Snyder may be like he really tries to reach for the stars with his filmmaking. Whether he succeeds or not is a matter of opinion, but that guy tries to reach really high. So I would say Wonder Woman was the closest.
See, I like Wonder Woman. I think that there are some issues with. I mean, there's issues with all these films. They're not perfect films by any means.
Beyond a shadow of a doubt.
But to me, the one that and I never hear anybody talking about it. I think Shazam is maybe the most successful of the
Okay,
films.
very interesting. I honestly have not seen Shazam in its entirety.
Joseph.
I, yes, that's a demerit. It's a demerit. I've seen some scenes in it, and that film looks like a film that has heart. And I think one of the things I like about it is he really comes off as a kid,
Yes. Yes.
right? And
Absolutely.
like, there's that whole long scene where he first meets Savannah, and Savannah beats the living hell out of him.
Hmm.
No quarter asked, no quarter given, relentlessly chases this dude and beats the hell out of him. that felt like a kid's disillusionment and fear
Mhm.
and being out of their depth.
Yes.
And
Y-
that's what I can appreciate about a scene like that. Like that made perfect sense for Billy Batson in this super body just trying to get away.
y- Yes. And so I would strongly suggest you watch Shazam.
Okay.
I will say that it's the first superhero movie. My daughter's 8 years old. It's the first one that when she watched it, I think she was more excited than scared at part. I mean, there's still some scary parts in it, but I
No
think
doubt.
there's such a message of like Billy Batson he's literally living every kid's dream. He when things get too hard for him, he says a word and becomes a superhero. And I think that I think the kids especially can see that and dream on that in a way that they're never going to wake up and be Diana. They don't want to wake up and be Bruce Wayne. They don't want to get frozen for 50 years and be Captain America. To me, it's the most aspirational of superhero films for a little kid.
Interesting.
So
I can see that. Yes.
I think it's a really interesting film for that reason.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I wanted to talk about sort of the interconnectivity because we've both been reading comics for many many years, and comics are all about things being connected. It's about continuity carrying through. One of the things whenever anyone asks me why I love comics, I always say my dad read Action Comics in the 40s. I read Action Comics in the 80s and 90s, and my son will read comics in the 2020s. Like I love the linear the through line that travels through comics. I love that stuff. But do you think that there is a benefit to being DC right now in terms of films where there's not the you don't have to be a slave to the other films that have come before. And I think one of the hardest parts about being Marvel right now is that you have all this expectation, and there's also expectation to connect.
Right.
Almost no Marvel film can exist as an island right now. So do you think
Right.
there's a benefit to being part of that Marvel connectivity, or do you think there's benefit to being an island out by yourself?
Well, the thing is, so in any business, right, competition is harder, right? And the fact that Marvel established a Marvel Cinematic Universe, I personally think it was a mistake for DC to ever try to establish
Agreed.
an extended universe, right? I think that from jump, they should have said, you know what? We're never going to beat them. So let's go in the other direction. Let's just make films. All those films are silenced. And that way, because we don't have the crutch of continuity, we can do absolutely anything we want. Like that's part of the beauty of the DC universe of comics. The DC Marvel is the world outside your window, and DC is the opposite of that. DC is defying gravity. It's a guy who gets transported to a planet named Rand through a zeta beam and is suddenly like a space adventurer, and he's away from home for 3 months. And then when he gets back home, he doesn't know when the next zeta beam is coming. It's, Diana coming to our society to try and save us when, quite frankly, we don't deserve it. It's four people surviving a plane crash and deciding that they're going to challenge the unknown. That's the DC universe. It's amazingly fantastic. And you can do anything. Once you bring in continuity, you restrain yourself. Yeah. So I think they have now figured out not only how to be silos, but through the multiverse, now they can be the continuity too. And they can do it in a way that is organically DC, right?
Yeah.
And they can actually incorporate the CW verse, which quite frankly has been doing it better than the
Yes.
than the movie universe for years,
Yes.
right? So I think they now have the path, and that path is going to make them so different from Marvel that it's going to be a beautiful thing.
Has there been a particular DC project, whether in film or TV, that's been announced that isn't out yet that has you particularly excited about what DC is offering?
Suicide Squad, James Gunn's Suicide Squad. That looks that looks so good. When they showed the trailer during DC Fandom,
Mhm.
And first of all, the sense of excitement that he had for it, but also the fact that they're just pulling out the craziest villains, villains that seem formidable, villains that seem ridiculous. And that's part of the beauty of the Suicide Squad. And the thing is, you don't know who's coming back,
Right.
right? So that film excites me a great deal. I'm very much looking forward to it.
Hmm. Did you see Birds of Prey?
I have, of course.
We
Come
didn't.
on.
Damn, how
I'm a
much?
former, listen, I'm a former Birds of Prey editor. How am I not gonna support Birds of Prey?
That's
Yes,
true. What'd you think of that film?
I dug it. I
I
liked Birds of Prey.
I love it.
I liked it. Again, that's a film about every character has an arc.
Mm-hmm.
Harley, Helena, Dinah, um, Cass has an arc. If I have any problems with Birds of Prey, it's the portrayal of Cassandra Cain, but that can be an interview in and of itself, and we're not going to bog this one down with it. But that said, one of my favorite scenes in that film is where they're in the final battle and the camera is just going around and they're like all helping each other out and just getting into it and mixing it up. That kind of choreography that shows solidarity, that's really great.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing about the Birds of Prey as a concept. You have these women who come from different life experiences, different worlds, but when it's time, they will stand together and they will take on anybody.
We have a question.
Anybody.
We have a question from our Twitch stream here.
Sure.
Do you have any thoughts on the Marvel Netflix series and what you think might come out of that sort of style of storytelling, and if we'll see those characters again in Marvel continuity?
Okay, I have too many thoughts on the Marvel Netflix series. We don't have time for all of them. Let me say this. That was beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It was seminal.
Mm-hmm.
Daredevil season 1 and seasons 3 are perfect television. Perfect television. So well written, so well acted. I'm a big fan of the Punisher series.
Mm-hmm.
I love the way they handled those characters. I love the way that they didn't glamorize what it's like to be a soldier. They really got down into the weeds of the consequences of that life, right? The fact that we got to see the Daughters of the Dragon together, I have loved. I've been a big fan of Misty and Colleen since I was a kid. I honestly did not watch Iron Fist. I didn't watch any of the seasons of Iron Fist. So my exposure to Danny was through the Defenders, which was fine. I don't think we're ever going to see those characters like that again. And I think that's okay, right? I feel like one of the things that we forget is that these characters are myths.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, it's okay to see multiple interpretations of Daredevil. It's okay to see multiple interpretations of the Punisher. I think for myself, the only thing that I want is I just want quality. Mm-hmm. Like, don't ask me to pay for a Netflix subscription or don't ask me to pay for a movie ticket and you don't bring it. like, don't ask me to support your mediocrity. That's my thing. And I feel like with the Marvel Netflix universe, even if sometimes there were stumbles, I feel like everyone gave best effort.
I also think that I don't know how it would have connected if you try. I know that we get it in comics, so why can't we get it in other media? But it seems to me like the universe where Thanos snaps half of the world out of reality is so different than the universe of Jessica Jones that I don't know how those characters would have interacted in any sort of meaningful way where it didn't just feel like cognitive dissonance the whole time. So I don't think it's a bad thing that they were siloed in their own little world.
Yeah, listen, you could have pulled it off. Yeah. And obviously the Hell's Kitchen of Daredevil came from the 2012 Avengers film.
Right.
They had one very smart line about it, and then we're done here. I think that because Avengers Endgame is a story that starts with human tragedy which is the loss of Hawkeye's family, and it ends with Human Beauty, which is the reunion of Steve and Peggy. I think those human touch points would allow you to connect such a street level mystical landscape of gravitas with an amazing cosmic landscape. So I think you can do the horizontals and the verticals, but it's not necessary.
Yeah.
We don't need to see Matt Murdock interact with Rocket. I don't need to see that, right? It's like, okay, there's the street, there's the cities, there's the space, there's the mystical dimensions. That's all part of one ecosystem. I don't need them to smash up against one another because I innately know that they're all part of the same thing.
Sure. We got another question here about the Disney Plus MCU series.
Sure.
And sort of how you think those will deal with continuity, but also on the DC side, the HBO Max series that are starting, do you see those as competing factions, or do you see those as having different goals?
I would say entirely different goals, right? Because the Disney Plus Marvel series are a clear extension of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right? It's kind of like what they're doing with Star Wars. The idea that you will always have your fix. You will find a way to always give you a fix. And these shows are the bridges between the films, right? Whereas with the upcoming HBO Max Green Lantern series, which I'm so looking forward to, I don't think that's going to aspire to connect to anything. Like, it shouldn't connect to Krypton. It shouldn't connect to Legends of Tomorrow. It's its own animal, right? And that's such a big, vast universe. You could explore the Green Lantern Corps for 20 years. I don't need it to connect to other things. You know, show me the Green Lanterns and show me the galaxies and give me Jessica Cruz and Simon Baz and Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart. Give me some Journey story. Give me Kilowog. I want Kilowog.
I want Kyle Rayner. I want Mogo, and I want Gnort.
And I tell you who I would throw in there, to be fair. I want the Omega Men from the Tom King series, since you mentioned Kyle Rayner.
Yep.
Like, Kyle Rayner is so integral to Omega Men that Omega Men has to now exist in the same world as Kyle Rayner, the same galaxy. So if they were going to bring anything in, for me, it would be those Omega Men.
Now, here's another question from our Twitch stream, and this is a film I haven't seen.
Okay.
Your thoughts on the Punisher Warzone film from 2008?
Wow. Okay. So I'm going to get in maybe mild trouble now, because I know Lexi Alexander through Twitter. I've never seen Punisher. Yeah, it's not good. I saw the only Punisher film that I've seen is the Dolph Lundgren Punisher film from way back.
That's the only one I've seen too.
And I have a lot of love for that film. I never saw the ones with Thomas Jane. So I never saw Punisher Warzone. I did also see that short film Dirty Laundry with Thomas Jane as the Punisher, which I think is brilliant in a number of ways.
Yeah.
So the only thing I could say about Punisher Warzone, from what I know about it, is that it wasn't pretentious. Like, basically, there's not this big journey to become the Punisher. Lexi leaned into the visceral nature of the Punisher at that time.
Yeah.
Right. And that you can clearly see. I've seen some scenes on YouTube. But for me, my favorite Punisher is really what John Bernthal did in the Netflix series. Like, to me, it's like that's the standard to beat now.
That felt to me like reading Punisher comics as a kid.
Yeah, I mean, that was so good. That reminds me of the 11-volume Garth Ennis Punisher run, which was, Punisher Max, which was basically a real man in our world. There were no costumes. There were no superheroes. Like, that started with Bourne, and I think ended with Valley Forge. Those 11 volumes, that's the standard.
Yeah. So looking forward on the Marvel side, is there a do you feel optimistic about the films they've announced? Eternals and Shang-Chi, and there are a number of films that I keep waiting for a Marvel film to tank. A friend of mine makes fun of me all the time. Was he said to me, like, I said to him, "Oh, Guardians of the Galaxy, no one's gonna see that. Only real comic nerds are gonna see that, like me." And that movie was huge. And I said, "Oh, Ant-Man won't work," and that's huge. Do you think that they are threading the needle with these films, or do you think they're all going to be smash hits?
I mean, listen, well, first of all, the definition of a smash hit in the new world
It's
that
true.
is emerging with Disney making streaming the tip of the spear and less movie theaters. And regardless of what Pfizer is saying, we don't know if that vaccine is totally ready.
Right.
And when it's ready, it's going to take a long time to disperse. So the definition of a hit is going to change, right? Um, I think that they will all be successful because the thing about the Marvel films is they're not ashamed of their characters. They're not trying to stray away from the nature of the characters. And at the core of any Marvel film are human journey stories, right? That was kind of like the fulcrum on which Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and Bill Everett, Steve Ditko, all these people, the Marvel universe that came out of the 60s were human journey stories, and so are the films. And so I think all of those are going to be successful. I'm very much looking forward to, I mean, if we're talking about films, I'm looking forward to all of them. If we're talking to TV shows, I think WandaVision is just going to break our brains. I
Mm-hmm.
think Falcon and Winter Soldier is going to be the spy fix that we desperately, desperately need. Um, Miss Marvel is going to be so welcome to see Kamala Khan in live action in her world. And I think it's going to be a fun exploration, and let's see what happens.
All right, my last question for you, Joseph, is
Yeah.
let's get both Kevin Feige and I don't know who the DC equivalent is, but they both come to you and they say, "All right, you have a budget, you have unlimited resources. What property do you want to next bring to the big screen? You can choose one from Marvel, one from DC. What would you want to do? What would you want to be the spearhead on?"
Well, with Marvel, I would want to do Fantastic Four because Fantastic Four is about family, right? And it's about the fact that they're Imaginauts, which I think is a term that Mark Waid coined for them during his run with Mike Wieringo. They they go to all the amazing places, and it's for the love of science,
Mhm.
and they're a family. We need that now. We need stories about family and cohesion. So Fantastic Four would be the one that I would do if Kevin Feige gives me, backs up the Brinks truck to the front of my house.
Yeah.
If it's, I mean, I don't know who it is at DC these days, right? But if Warner Media were to do it, Jason Killer were to back up the Brinks truck. Um, it's crazy. I would want to. No, I can't say that because that's basically DC's version of the Fantastic Four. So that's not fun. I tell you what, I think I would want to do the Spectre,
Okay.
right? I think the idea of a cop who gets killed in the line of duty and has to come back and be like the spirit of vengeance and justice, that's really compelling. That's really compelling, especially now because of what's happening in our society with the police and the idea that someone like Corrigan would be a good cop, right?
Yeah.
And that he would probably lose his life to injustice. And that the only way that there can be justice is for him to be the Spectre. I would sink my teeth into
That's That's really fun. And any creators that are watching, if you don't pitch that to DC right now, I don't know what you guys are doing with yourselves because
that.
that's
Yeah, exactly. And basically, that was a freebie. I love you. You're welcome.
well, Joseph, where can folks find you on the internet if they want to learn more about your work or get in touch with you? What's the best way to do that?
Okay, so on Facebook, I'm Joe Illidge. On Twitter, I am Joseph P. Illidge. On Instagram, I am illmaster1 because I wanted to shake it up a bit. And that's really about it. Those are the three platforms where you can find me. And, you know, it's always great to interact with different creators and people and just have positive conversations
Yes.
about these things that we love.
Yes. And when can folks pick up MPLS Sound?
MPLS Sound will be available. It's going to be published by Humanoids, distributed by Simon & Schuster. It will be available April 13th,
Okay.
2021. We are going to make it to 2021. Good
Yes,
things are going to happen next year. One of those will be this book will come out. and I hope you love it, and I hope people see themselves in some way, shape, or form in these characters.
There's a whole conversation to be had about the sort of the last 3 or 4 years. We've seen so many more music-based comics, and I have lots of thoughts on that. So maybe one day we'll talk about music-based comics when the book.
Okay, I'm up for that.
Stick around so I can say goodbye to you off air, but we're going to stop the stream now. Bye, everybody. Thank you for watching. Back next week.
Bye, everyone.
And we'll take care. Thanks, guys. All right. Thank you for making the time. I really do appreciate it.
No, you're welcome. That was a lot of fun. Good questions.
Oh, thank you. Just, you know, I feel like people at conventions, we always talk to creators and we ask them stuff like, can you eat breakfast food all day or just at breakfast? You know, and
yeah.
Like the human side of creators. And without conventions, no one's seeing anybody. So this is just like a little way to get, you know, some normal conversation going.
I think that's great, man. Well, if you ever want to do it again, like next year, you got to let me know.
I will definitely let you know. Thank you so much. Stay safe, my friend. And we'll talk.
You're welcome, Brian. Likewise. We'll talk soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.